Well, it's Christmas, and it is gloomy outside. Today is the solstice, which means this is the shortest day of the year. From here on in, light gets more and more, longer and longer. So as you're preparing for your Christmas, remember that the light has come, and we rejoice in that. Many of you love the theater, and so do I. I hear all the time about various ones of you who have season tickets to the Drury or various other theaters, and I keep saying, I'm going to do that. I'm going to actually get myself a season ticket, and Walter and I to attend one of these lovely regional community and professional theaters that we have. When I was a little girl, I think I grew up in the heyday of TV kind of coming of age and having wonderful musicals on TV. I was sharing with Sunday school how I was the perfect age for Charlie Brown's Christmas, a Charlie Brown Christmas, when it first aired in 1965. I was 5 years old. I know I look very young, but I was 5 years old in 1965, so you can do that math. But I also was just absolutely in love with Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella. And it came on every year, and Leslie Ann Warren, I wanted to be Leslie Ann Warren. I wanted to wear her beautiful dress. I wanted to especially sing all the songs that she got to sing. And that was broadcast over and over years. Whitney Houston eventually reproduced that with a multicultural cast, and I think it's now on Broadway, which I would love to go see. But the music of that show I always loved. And one of my favorite songs was Celeste Holm, who played the fairy godmother. Do you remember Celeste Holm playing the fairy godmother? Oh, come on, you didn't watch Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella. But she had a wonderful song called Impossible. And the lyrics basically start out from Cinderella's perspective, which say that it's impossible for a plain country pumpkin to become a golden carriage. Impossible for a plain country pumpkin to become a golden carriage. Impossible for a poor country bumpkin and a prince to join in marriage. And 4 white mice will never be 4 white horses. Such fiddly-dee and fal-de-ral of courses. Impossible. Well, the fairy godmother comes along and changes the lyrics to say, it's possible for a plain country pumpkin to become a golden carriage. It's possible for a poor country bumpkin and a prince to join in marriage. And 4 white mice can always be 4 white horses. Such fiddle-dee and fal-de-ral of courses, possible, it's possible. Impossible things are happening every day. Well, as we celebrate Christmas, one of the phrases that caught me in the text as I was preparing, and the title of the sermon, Nothing Will Be Impossible with God. If we could do it all ourselves, a lot of impossible things would never actually happen. And as we think of the story of Mary and the virgin birth, many of us have discussed whether or not this actually could have happened. Is it a metaphorical narrative? Is it just some story that the ancient Christians made up? I'd like to think that perhaps they didn't make it up. There are lots of reasons why they wouldn't have made up such a scandalous story. Number one, to be pregnant and unmarried in that part of the world at that time, in fact anywhere in the world at that time, in the 1st century AD, would have meant shame, scandal, being put out of the community, and for Mary it would have meant death by stoning. She wasn't an older girl. She may have been somewhere between 14 to 16. Shame would have come upon her family. The ancient engagement rituals of the Jewish people meant that the 2 families literally killed an animal and sacrificed to God, scattered the blood on the ground, and walked through the blood together to seal the covenant. For Mary to have been found not to be a virgin would have brought shame on everyone. And even today, in parts of the East, we hear about honor killings where young girls are literally killed because they have brought shame to their families. This is the kind of story that would have been easier to tell another way. And so even scholars are skeptical that there is some kind of mystical metaphor involved here. There are ancient tales of God springing fully formed from the head of gods like Zeus, and other stories of immaculate conception. But Mary's story is a little messier than that. It's a little less clean. One of the important things that we have to remember is that Mary and Joseph were human beings. They were just two young people. It's thought that Joseph was probably a little older than Mary, but two young people who probably cared very much about each other. I can make that great assumption because in Matthew's text, it is Joseph's kind heart, the Bible tells us, that causes him to decide, even before he hears from the angel telling him that Mary is telling the truth, Joseph has already made up his mind that he's going to spare her any shame and put her away quietly. He wants to minimize the damage and the pain that's done to Mary. That sounds to me like someone who cares a great deal, someone who loves someone else and wants to spare them pain. So this story of you will become pregnant and bear a son, and his name shall be called Jesus, and of his kingdom there shall be no end, sounds wonderful and glorious and exciting, and it would have resonated with Mary because she's heard these scriptures, these prophecies all of her life. Her response is, may it be unto me even as you say. A response of submission, a response of, I can't believe it, and you keep telling me that it's true, and so if this is what God wants, then I will submit. Well, our impossibles are always beyond what we can do ourselves. If we could do it ourselves, then it would be hard to give God the glory. It would be hard to give a testimony in which we give God credit. Having to rely on God also develops the faith muscle. Although there are times in our lives, I think, when we say, okay, God, the faith muscle is really strong. It can take a rest right now. I've learned that lesson. Faith, moving through difficult situations, God got that one down. Could we move on to the next lesson? And on the other side, if we look around and if we don't attempt to do things that are beyond our own ability, then we really don't need God then, do we? We have a lot of impossibles that may be even awkward, even difficult and awkward and shameful for us to cooperate with. Think about Elizabeth and Mary. Elizabeth was miraculously pregnant at an old age, and God used that particular impossible situation to remind Mary, see, your cousin Elizabeth is pregnant even at her advanced age, for nothing will be impossible with God. Wow, these impossible moments keep showing up in our text. A young girl who is unmarried, finding herself pregnant in a shameful and scandalous situation, an old woman who shouldn't have been pregnant. Hard to believe that she will bring forth a child who will be the forerunner. But God does use the impossible situations of others to show what He can do for our own impossibles. It helps us. Doesn't it help you to know when God has moved in other people's lives? One of the reasons we share joys and concerns is that we want to hear how God has moved in other people's lives. If God has dealt with your impossible, then I have faith that He can deal with my impossible. That's why it's so important for you to share when God has moved in your life, for you to share the joys. When we've prayed, we want to know, has God healed? Has God helped? Has God enabled someone to move past a difficult situation? And when we hear your joys, those resonate with us as well, because we also know then that God is moving. Because He is really no respecter of persons. What He is able to do for you, He's able to do for me. It really doesn't matter the nature of our impossibles. All of our impossibles are possible moments because of God. If you were to make a list right now of the things that you think are impossible, I would challenge you to sort of do what Cinderella did. And we don't have God as a fairy godmother, that's not the point. But if a fairy godmother can ensure a ragtag little girl, that all of her impossible dreams can indeed come true, then certainly a loving, omniscient, omnipotent, faithful, and loving God can stand beside us and assure us that the things in our lives that we find to be impossible, the things in our lives that we find to be difficult, are exactly those things where He wants to step in and ensure that we're able to step over or tunnel through. There are lots of songs in the African American tradition that speak not about moving the mountain, but giving us strength to climb. Not that bad things won't happen or that difficult seasons won't come in life, but that God is faithful enough to move past impossible moments, because with Him, nothing shall be impossible. Think this Christmas about the possibles that sit all around your table. Perhaps the baby that you never thought would be born, the family member who has gone on to glory but has gone on after living a long life, the family member who's been reconciled to you, the person who is sick but is now well, maybe the job you never thought you'd have but you do have, or that your family member has, the presents you thought you might not be able to afford to give, maybe the presents that you weren't able to give, but wow, you're still having a wonderful Christmas anyway. Maybe you are just grateful to be with those you love and grateful to have a church where you can come and worship. Maybe you, like I, am just grateful to be sharing it with both church and family. And maybe you, like I, are looking forward to next year with a long list of prayers for how God might move. And there are lots of things, First Christian, that used to be on a list that we might have marked impossible, right? If you think about the history of our church, God has taken some impossibles and made them truly possible. Not that we're going to do everything, not that we want or can do everything, but I do believe whatever He has laid on our hearts, whatever we put our mind to remember that nothing is impossible with God. I count all of our impossibles and I turn them over to God, knowing that He has provided for other impossible moments, and He will be with us moving forward, reminding us that with Him, all things are indeed possible. From the point of the impossible manger to the point of the impossible resurrection, God has proved again and again He moves beyond impossible to possible. And it's because of those possible moments that we are here. Merry Christmas, Jesus.